to the update. I'm Caitlin Beard.
And I'm Caitlin Kolarik.
Tonight we're doing a special panel discussion on Barry's recent hookah ban, and we have three people here to help us talk about it. The first is Emily Sudholt, second is Rachel Hyde, and third is Catherine Levy.
We also requested that a peer educator come to this panel, but they wanted to stress the fact that they are not actually a part of the administration. They were only responsible for sending out the Mythbusters email. Shortly before we started our panel here, we actually received a campus-wide email from Lindsay Taylor about the ban, which is pretty interesting. If we want to go ahead and start by looking over this. She started off saying basically that same thing. They appreciate us voicing our opinions, and they go on to say that there was a lot of discussion and research done prior to actually enforcing this ban, which is very interesting. We can talk about later. They move on to say that it's obviously a controversial topic, and that they believe that their ban was made based on sound rationale. And that it's completely consistent with the mission of Berry College and residence life. They continue to say that it's not illegal, hookah smoking is not illegal under law, but a lot of colleges have had issues with it and have, either banned it or discussed banning it. Most of the time they do give the students a bit of time to actually kind of discuss it, as we're doing now, but they said that they don't allow hookahs based on their no smoking policy in residence halls, and while they do promote social interaction, they tend to detract from the overall community aspect of residence hall living. Not sure how that differs in any way from smoking cigars or cigarettes. If anything, it's more of a social group activity. And then they also say that it was a fire hazard, which is really interesting, and I know that a lot of us want to comment on that in a minute. But they continue, in the first email, they said that they wanted to do it based on promoting safe, healthy campus, and that students mix drug into the hookah. They want to ask our help and support of this policy revision. Not sure how well that's going to go over, but they welcome additional comments. But what I found to be very interesting was the fact that they said that they would welcome additional comments and discussion about possible revisions for this policy 1 year from now. So they're not even going to be considering talking about revising the policy until a year from now, which I find to be very interesting. And if we want to go ahead and...
Well, more on that later. I think it would be nice to start off with a history of hookahs and how they first originated. And we actually had the privilege of talking to the owner of Silwan Restaurant, Yosef Abbasi, and he features a hookah bar in his restaurant, just recently opened. So if we could just go ahead and take a quick look at the interview that we just conducted with him about the history of hookahs. Yeah.
Based on who you ask, the hookah is from either Turkey or India near Pakistan. Over 500 years ago. It was originally made out of a coconut shell and a couple of pipes. It's eventually traveled to Egypt, Persia. All the different cultures have their own shapes and styles of what today we call the hookah. Some places call it the hubbly bubbly or nargile, depending on where you're at.
He also went over the parts of a hookah because it can look pretty interesting to people who are unfamiliar with its make or model, I guess. So he discussed what each part does.
Which is where your mouth goes on this end. And right here's your carbon foil, depending on preferences. This is the bowl. Underneath here is where you put the tobacco in here. And then the smoke and the charcoal goes on top, passes through into the tobacco, flows to the stem. The smoke and everything goes in here to this to the base, which holds the water. And it travels up back through this pipe here, which is where your mouth goes on this end. And right here's your carburetor to help relieve with some of the smoke if smoke ever gets stale or builds up too much into the base here.
I guess one of the first things that we need to talk about is the fact that the peer educator email and the email that we received from Lindsay Taylor, all of those kind of emails have related the hookah back to drug paraphernalia. We actually have part of an interview about about that, and then I'd like to hear y'all's comments too about, do you think it's really used for that much? So let's look at the interview real quick.
Which it is true that the hookah did start for opium smoking and moved on to hash. And from that point on, it's kind of migrated itself and built to become just a base for smoking tobacco. The commonplace now, a lot of people look at it because it has such a big history with opium, with hashish and everything. People look at it and go, oh, it's for narcotics, it's all illegal drug use, but it's becoming more and more commonplace. People are now associating with just like what I am, a hookah lounge where you come in, you smoke flavored tobacco. It's not about hard drugs.
A big discussion among other college campuses relating back to the hookah and discussing potential bans is the fact that it's considered a cultural activity. And we spoke to Yusuf about the potential detriment of banning it because of the Middle Eastern culture related back to it.
It's so much a part of the way of life. It's so much a part of their culture, just part of their routine. Here we smoke cigarettes. It's trying to say what would happen if you banned cigarettes in America. You're not going to be able to do it. You're asking for the impossible.
So I'd like to ask what y'all think about those two issues. The hookah as a drug paraphernalia. Have y'all ever seen that? I've never actually even seen that at all. I've never witnessed that at all. And what do you think that does to Middle Eastern students who might come to Berry, who a large part of their culture that they've grown up with, they can no longer have access to? What do y'all think about that?
Honestly, not to sound sarcastic or anything, but for those people who do choose to do drugs, it seems like a silly idea to use a hookah, one of the hardest things to run with. For instance, if you get caught, something like that, it just doesn't seem very smart to use it. And if you're gonna say that's drug paraphernalia, you might as well go and say apples, cans, Coke cans, anything. You got water bottles, pipes. There's so much that you could ban.
Right.
Because it could be considered drug paraphernalia.
Mm-hmm.
And adding to that, a lot of students, we have to smoke outside. If, you choose to smoke cigarettes, cigars, whatever, you have to smoke outside. So I don't think it's very possible that a lot of students are going to be foolish enough to actually smoke marijuana out of a hookah when there are people walking by, cops driving by, everybody's, paying attention. And it's kind of a potent thing to smoke too. So, people are gonna know.
Again, emphasizing that drug paraphernalia, there are so many different other things that Berry could have restricted, not just a hookah. They narrowed it down to just one way to consume tobacco, which was kind of bizarre.
Yeah, why not ban cigarettes,
Exactly.
cigars? They're worse, really, than a hookah ever could be. So.
Speaking about the Middle Eastern students, it's my tongue. Not particularly, but Berry is not necessarily known for a whole lot of diversity. And as far as Berry trying to focus more on the community that we do have and providing as much of a comfortable or a healthy environment for everyone involved, would say that a hookah is smoking a hookah for an hour is the equivalent of 100 cigarettes. So I would say that is potentially harmful, and I am glad that they do. That students do smoke outside. Just as far as I agree with the idea of not having tobacco.
Just a side note on that, how many people do you see smoking a hookah by themselves?
Yeah.
So 100 cigarettes if you smoked a hookah by yourself for an hour. That's not what's up. People smoke hookah to talk to your friends, to do your homework, to go outside, get your nicotine dose without smelling awful, without having to taste cigarettes. Without the pollution, just absolutely everything.
Well, and actually, Yusuf actually had something to say about the difference between cigarettes and smoking a hookah. So let's take a quick look at that.
Possible. You can tell people hookahs are safer than cigarettes. People are going to tell you yes, people are going to tell you no, I'm going to tell you yes. It's like saying tea has more caffeine than coffee. Yes, tea does, and concentrated amounts because there's more caffeine in a pound of tea than there is in a pound of coffee. But it takes less tea to make a cup than it does coffee. Make sense? So when it comes to hookah and tobacco, there's 0.005% nicotine and 0% tar. There's no additives in smoking a hookah. But when you look at your common day cigarettes, there's all those additives and everything that goes into it that ultimately makes them a lot more unhealthy and a lot worse of a habit than casually smoking a hookah. Cigarettes, people do it because they're addicted. Hookahs, people smoke because they enjoy it. I think that's one of the best cases for